And welcome everybody to the 24th edition of the Deserve to Win podcast, a very special edition. A couple of big differences today. We're going to be focusing primarily on a single story. This is the story, of course, of the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, males excluding females, the boys club, and all the nonsense that we've kind of stumbled into, this hornet's nest that they've kicked open by mistreating Puja as badly as they have. We're going to talk about that. But we also have two fantastic guests today, both of them from Locke, a guy named Tom Cunningham, and Mike McMorrow, huge winners in a case against the FTC brought on behalf of their client Stratix. Really is going to turn, I think, the telecommunications law in this country on its head with Section 230, the law that built the internet, now being applied to telecommunications providers for the first time ever. Massive, massive case. Cannot wait to talk about that. But before we get there, folks, who do we have? Start with you, Queenie.
Hi, I'm Queenie Puja Amin, partner at Troutman Amin LLP.
And still on the panel.
Yeah, still on the Troutman Amin panel.
Still on the Troutman Amin panel. And to my left, who do we have?
Hi guys, my name is Brittany. I'm an attorney at Troutman Amin and the Baroness of the TCPA world.
Fantastic to have you. To the far right.
I am Tori Guidry, the Dame of TCPA World, and an associate at Troutman Amin LLP.
All right, and I'm going to not make a blonde comment at you today, although with Catherine joining the firm now, we have 3 blondes in the office, and it's just too much for me. I can't handle it. Let's throw it over to Miami. Who do we have out there?
Hi guys, I'm Jennifer Cabrera. I'm an associate attorney in our Boca Raton office, and I am the Countess of TCPA World.
The rarely seen Countess, but because of the special nature of today's show, we had to go to Miami to get our Countess on. And not to be without the white male perspective, who do we have out in Alabama?
Hey, I'm John Hinson. I am an attorney at Troutman Amin, and glad to join.
We love you, John. It's great to have you. And a special guest, not our interview guest, but just joining us as a special panelist, given the nature of today's show, we have somebody really, really special. Lily, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm the Lilt Davtyan CEO of Phonexa. We're a lead gen and call tracking platform for a lot of different industries, but mostly direct-to-consumer, high-traffic industries.
Lilith is one of the most powerful lady CEOs in the country. Obviously sits at the head of Phonexa, an incredibly powerful brand, incredibly compliant lead generation company with a suite of services that it offers. Just really, it's an honor to have you here, Lilith. And given the nature of the conversation, we really wanted to bring in a prominent female business owner, somebody that's kind of renowned in the industry, because you're a very powerful voice. You're a very powerful person. You're somebody that people really look up to. Someone really, frankly, similar to Puja. And just to kind of level set, so here's what's going on. Mobile Ecosystem Forum, right, MEF, was having a conference in Miami. They're calling it their leadership conference, which is very ironic, I think, because they're showing a complete lack of leadership here. Puja was an invited guest, somebody that I think was very high profile compared to kind of the people that they've got speaking there. Puja was definitely somebody, of course, who has a national following. And Dario, what the heck's this guy's last name? Dario. He sounds like the enemy from Super Mario Brothers. Dario. Betts or Beto or something? I don't know the guy's last name. Betty? Yeah, Dario Betty? Anyway, whatever the guy's name is, the president of this organization that considers itself to be an international trade conglomerate looking at mobile ecosystem something or other. He emails Puja, after she'd already put in a lot of work, already kind of met with the moderator of the panel, already kind of put together quite a few materials, just shoots her a 2-line email on International Women's Day and basically says, the audience just isn't interested in hearing from you. Which was just a remarkably cutting, dismissive sort of statement, the sort of thing that you would just never expect to see, directed to anybody, incredibly unprofessional. But then when you kind of zoom out and start kind of thinking about the context, when you look at MEF, when you look at their website and you see their smiling all-male board, when you see all these pictures of a bunch of men with like maybe one token female in the picture, but really it's just a bunch of men. You look at their webinars where you've got 5 men and no women, 7 men and no women, 8 men and no women on a webinar, which, by the way, I have never seen before. Like, you really have to try to get to 8 men on a webinar with no woman. I mean, it's literally impossible unless you are trying to exclude women. And I mean, look, we have a conference ourselves, right? We're throwing the Law Conference of Champions in July. Could you imagine this? if we invited a guest to come speak at our conference, and the week before the conference, right, we know they live in Miami, they're like across the country from the event, and the week before, with no explanation, I just shoot them a 2-line email saying, yeah, you know, we don't think you're interesting to our panel, or I don't think our audience is going to like you, we're going to switch directions, bye. I mean, it is the most incredibly disrespectful and inappropriate thing I think I've seen in my career. And you know, obviously, from my perspective, there is no question, looking at the background here, that if Puja was a man, that would not have happened. There's just no chance. There's just no chance. And maybe, you know, they still would have gone a different direction with the panel, because again, we don't know for sure what led to the decision to have her removed from the panel. They never talked about it, right? These guys are cowards. As soon as we raised it on social media, as soon as we started bringing this up, they disappeared, right? Closed ranks, you know, they shriveled up like the little cowards that they are. And that's what you expect to see from guys like this, right? Because they think that they can operate this way. There won't be repercussions. They're going to get away with it. They can take a strong woman and try to tear her down, try to make her feel bad about themselves, because this is what these guys do, right? Like literally, there's like a screw loose for people like this. They think that this is how, you know, I don't know, like it just makes them feel good to make other people feel bad. And it's just disgusting. To me, it's a disgusting thing what this guy did. So we're not going to let it go, right? This is like he thinks it's just going to like it's just going to like disappear. And the problem is that Queenie has such a following, such a fan base, and there's so much anger and resentment over this that, I mean, I'm hearing that there's going to be some protests over this. Like, I don't know this, but I'm hearing that there's kind of a grassroots thing going on in Miami. I'm not entirely sure, you know, what it's going to look like, how many people are going to show up. But by the time this airs, because we're recording the day before this forum is taking place, by the time this airs, I think there's a very good likelihood that there will have been a protest, that there will be some press about this, that, you know, this will become a very high-profile thing. And I got to tell you, Dario, you know, you really brought it upon yourself. And, you know, so with the kind of that background, Lilith, you know, I know you're kind of coming into this with fresh eyes, but you are a very powerful voice. Again, you're somebody that people really respect as the CEO of such a great company like Phonexa. So we wanted to bring you on and give you a chance to kind of weigh in. I know you've known Puja for many years. You know, it'd be really interesting. Like, what are your thoughts here, you know, kind of hearing this?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for teeing it up in the background. It's very helpful. I don't know any about this particular conference, but I do know Puja, and I can't imagine that actually really did happen, that there's not a lot of people that want to hear from Puja. I mean, even if we were to separate the fact that I think she's great and she has a great following and everything that she has to say is very valuable, even if that wasn't the case, we own a conference. That's not how things operate. If you really don't have enough people wanting a specific topic, there's a lot of ways to go around it and ask them to change it, maybe change a perspective just based on the audience. But this is a person. This isn't the topic. So I think there's a lot more going on that I may not be privy of, or maybe even you guys might not be. I try to stay away from that. I don't associate myself with, you know, fully male dominated places that don't allow women, but I also don't do the opposite either. I don't like fully dominated women spaces that don't allow men, and I stay completely away from it. I've been lucky to have been supported by mostly men, but I also know that it takes stronger men to allow a woman into an organization or a panel, because women are the ones that empower other women. It's not very easy for men to just bring in a lot of powerful women, but if they find the right first couple of them, the organization booms from there, right? So it's just, I think it's bad business. I think it's just, eventually, you know, things do turn out the way that they're supposed to turn out. I think maybe it's better for Puja to not even be associated with this. And I know I'm looking at the silver lining here, but you know, I've learned my lesson enough times to know that if they don't want you, it's their problem. Don't take it too hard. I think, you know, I like that you're spreading awareness, because I think women need that. But, you know, I know you, Puja. You got this.
Yeah, and without question, I mean, Lil, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, look, without question, right, we all dodged a bullet. I mean, if Puja had used her credibility to advance this organization, I mean, that would have been a real a real problem. I mean, that would have been a real tragedy. This isn't a tragedy. This is actually a really good thing, right? These people have shown themselves for exactly who they are, just in the nick of time.
Right.
Because otherwise, I mean, who knows? You have been out there talking about MEF as if it was a good thing. It was just a terrible, terrible situation. But Lily, like you're a great leader, and I know you're gonna have to drop here because you only have a few minutes because you're like the busiest person in the world. But you know, we hear what you're saying, and one of the things that we're going to be talking about the rest of the show is, you know, other groups, organizations, maybe that you know pretend to be kind of woman first, that, you know, go quiet in situations like this when you would really expected to have them heard. Where somebody like you, I think you and Puja are very similar. Like, you're very balanced. Like, you don't pretend to be, you know, folks that only want to be, you know, women organization. You're not looking to be like a woman first, you know, kind of a feminist lean. I mean, you just want to be the leader that you are and just be left alone, right? And I think that you and Puja really kind of see eye to eye on that.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, at the end of the day, neither I nor Puja can deny the fact that we came into a very male-dominated space. Like, we can't come with, you know, all this loud noise and remove the men and just like push all this women power. Don't get me wrong, I'm all about women power, but I think there's a time and a place and a correct way of doing it. And I think the more humble approach that you take, the more support you actually get from both men and women. And I think humility is lacking on both sides when it comes to fully male and fully female. That's why it just takes a little more intelligence and humble people to be able to bring organizations like that together. And not a lot of them out there right now are the right people, in my opinion.
Love you, Lilt. Thank you so much. I know you've got to drop. In fact, I think you and I have some dinner tonight. And so I'm looking forward to seeing you. You're fantastic.
Thanks, Lilt.
Be safe, Lilt. We'll see you later.
Appreciate you. Bye.
Yeah, so I mean, humility is lacking. I mean, that really is, you know, something to be said. You know, and the disrespect and the dismissiveness. I mean, it really is a problem. And there's a couple other shades to this, and I want to talk about a few other things. But before I go any further, Puja, why don't I pause? Like, what do you think here? Weigh in. Kind of what are your thoughts here as we get moving?
Well, you've known how long I've respected Lilith since the day I met her. There's something about her, and she is very humble, right? Even as powerful as she is, she's humble for anyone she meets, whether it's a man or a female, but she is someone who walks into the room and owns the room. And, you know, whether it's her being a female or a beautiful female or just, you know, regardless, it's just because she knows her business. She's good at what she does, and that confidence is instilled in her. And one thing I noticed from the start with Lilith, she has a following. Her employees love her. The people love to work at Phonexa, has such a great reputation, and that is through her leadership. And so therefore, I've always looked up to her, especially before we met her, way before we started our firm. And so, you know, whether I intentionally try to kind of mimic women like that or not, she has made a lasting impression on me in all the right ways. So really, really appreciate her thoughts. One thing that she said was really interesting was, you know, when women have all women organizations, you know, you stop and reflect as to why those organizations exist. And when you come to needing those organizations and they don't show up for you, it begs the question as to why do they exist, right? What are their beliefs? What is their end goal, right? Is their end goal to show men that we can too, or is the goal to help other women, other younger women to help achieve what they have? And so, you know, I get myself questioning these organizations, or at least the people who are leading these organizations. And then one thought that just crossed my mind just right now was, well, what if men had an organization of all men? How would women feel about it?
Well, I mean, that's MEF, right? I mean, that's pretty much what we're talking. That's pretty much what we're talking about.
You know, and so it can go both ways. And so it's just something to keep in mind, whether you're female or you're male. How would you feel if you were excluded?
Yeah, this is the interesting thing about kind of like this panel and having Lilith on and kind of everything that we're going to dive into here is like, we're not hardcore feminists around here, right? Like, we're not trying to like push any kind of like a liberal or like woke agenda. Like, that's not what this is about.
Nope.
It's literally about like just treating with each other with respect and not being, you know, just dismissive little pricks because you think you can be, right? It really is as simple as that. And so as we kind of dive into this and kind of unpackage it, we've got, in my view, there's kind of like three groups of people to blame, right? One, you've got Dario and presumably TJ, like the people who are like the hardcore, like, hey, you know, we just don't want to have Puja there, and we're a little boys club, and we're going to do things our way, and we can, and no one's going to stop us, right? Like that's the mindset. You can almost like tell, like that's the mindset. We're going to do it. We're going to be dismissive. We're not going to say anything. We're going to get away with it. Like that's the mindset, right? And of course, I mean, I eat guys like that for breakfast. Like, please tell me more about how you're going to get away with this, and I'll make sure that you don't. So that's one obvious group of people, but they're not alone, right? They have their enablers, right? And that's the problem. So then you look at a guy like Kevin Rupee. He's a partner over at Wiley Rain. I actually like this guy. I actually had respect for Kevin. I thought he was somebody that, maybe not a friend, but certainly a professional colleague, somebody that you could count on, somebody that had, I don't know, a spine, maybe, but apparently not, right? Because here this guy knows exactly what just happened to Puja, knows just how disgusting these people are, and rather than do the right thing, rather than show an ounce of bravery, he just is a coward. And he just goes forward with the panel, completely disrespecting Puja, just completely. Just like walking over her figurative dead body. I mean, it's the saddest, grossest thing I've ever seen. The guy's a complete coward. I will never respect him again. And I can virtually guarantee you that once people find out like what he's done, I mean, the guy's career is over. Like this is his legacy. His legacy is joining with guys that are, just plainly disrespecting people and being very dismissive to women and being essentially a boys club. And he knows it. Like he knows it, and he goes forward with it because I don't even know what to say. Like it's just the most cowardly thing I think I've ever seen. And like he's almost worse than like the real scumbags because he's not a scumbag, but he's too weak to speak up or do anything against the scumbags. So it's kind of almost worse than being a scumbag. It's a terrible thing. And then you've got the third group of people, and this is kind of where you were leaning, right? So let's throw it around. Britt, what are your thoughts on this? It's funny because we had this podcast last time, and really neither you and Tori really kind of weighed in. Now's your opportunity. I'm not sure kind of from your vantage point, like what you're seeing and what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, everything there's been so much going on, but like once, we heard about this thing happening with Puja and their response, it was disgusting because, I mean, for anybody to really treat whether male or female, somebody like that, and just remove somebody off a panel, just a complete disregard for anything that they were prepping for, honestly, and just like really not considerate of her and what she prepared for to go to that conference. And so I was really upset about that. And also with Link Unite too, I mean, that's a huge missed opportunity, like you said. I mean, they promote women empowerment and they're, conferences are all built around women. All the conferences are all women people, and so that is just also disappointing that they didn't speak up. But fortunately for me in my situation, or just working at this firm, I feel very fortunate to be in a place where you promote women like Puja and you have a woman partner, and there's plenty of women, although we do have John and Connor here at the firm, and I feel very fortunate to be in a place, in an environment that you welcome that. So thank you.
Well, I mean, of course. And, at the end of the day, it's always very personal for me. I mean, I don't talk about my background or how I grew up, but I mean, those of you that know me, I mean, like I had a single mom that raised me, right? So, I saw firsthand some really bad stuff, like really bad stuff. And I know that, now that I've kind of grown into the man I wanted to be, that I can't tolerate that. I just can't. And when I see it, and I really, like, everyone has to understand, like, when you see it, you have to be vicious. You have to be. Like, that is why you have the gift, the ability to be vicious. It's not for every day. It's not for walking around. It's not for when you're mad because your baseball team lost, right? It's for when you see real injustice, real disrespect, really something very disgusting. You can't hold back. Like, that is the moment when all those things that you have in your mind that you wonder, like, why do I have these dark places? It's for this. It's to allow you the ability to fight when you need to. So thank you for that, Britt. But yeah, I mean, this is something that's very personal to me, of course, and it's something that I really, truly, I believe in. And I know that you do too. Tori, what do you think?
Well, it's absolutely disgusting what happened to Puja here. And, I didn't start off in this type of law. And this is the first time that I've actually had a female boss. And I can tell you, I much prefer it. No offense, Eric, but I love having a female supervisor. It it's just different to some degree. I'm not quite sure if I can pinpoint every way that it's meaningful, but it certainly is meaningful. And the surprising thing is, coming into this industry as compared to criminal defense and being an assistant district attorney, I was aware of how male-dominated the legal field is, but in the lead generation world, it's so apparent how male-dominated it is. And it's just absolutely insane to me that this MEF organization would so blatantly take down one of the, if not the top female attorney in the industry like this in such a dismissive and disrespectful way.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it is literally nuts.
It's insane.
I wouldn't do this to anyone, right? And that's the thing. Like, again, like, we throw a conference, I wouldn't do this to anyone. And like, they thought it was okay to do it to Puja, of all people. I mean, it's just, my mind continues to just like rotate around it because it's so difficult for me to even comprehend, and it just keeps coming back to your point. I mean, like, telecom in particular, you mentioned lead gen, but like, you know, technology in particular is like the last bastion of like true male holdouts. I mean, every once in a while you see like Girls Who Code, right, is like one of these organizations that promotes women kind of in the computer science, in the hard tech world, where there still is a big underrepresentation of women, and that is exactly what this organization sits right there, right? It is the classic last remnants of the old boys club, because the practice of law really has moved to a large degree past it, right? I mean, there are still elements of that, particularly in big law, but I am happy to say, I believe, look, the work's not all done yet, but the practice of law, I think, has gotten much closer to the goals of equality, and certainly closer than many professions. But I think technology, as you're pointing out in particular, you know, MarTech, any form of technology, in particular telecom, for whatever reason, continues to be incredibly male-dominated, and just unabashedly so. I mean, to your point, like, just, we're not even going to hide it. Like, we're just going to like lean into it. Look at all these pictures on our website. Like, no effort whatsoever to conceal that this is a male-dominated sort of organization. It's nuts. But why don't we throw it over to our white male, John Henson, for your take.
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting, and it reminds me of something that my wife tells me a lot. I have a 11-year-old daughter, and she always says, you have to support her because no one else in the world is going to, right? And this is a perfect example of that, right? Is that you, like, the rest of the world wants to knock you down, and you have to have a base to support females. And you know, we're lucky that we have this base here at Troutman Amin that we support females. But it would be nicer if that base was a lot broader. So I think that's kind of my big takeaway from this whole thing.
How are you hanging in there, John? Like, watching all the fun as we kind of go to battle here against. I mean, you probably are pretty surprised. It's like very few law firms are just like, oh no, man, we're just gonna you know, hold my beer. We're gonna go to war real quick. You know, that's pretty unusual.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, I think it starts back with, you know, what's right behind you. It says deserve to win. And there's people who deserve to win. And there's people that don't. And if you can identify the people that don't, you know, you've got to call those people out.
Well said, John, man. I just love having you, man. John just always kind of just breaks it out, man. Like, here it is. And last but not least, Jen, we're going to throw it over to you. You are in Miami. You are planning to attend the protests tomorrow. And again, we don't know how big the protests are going to be. You know, it's hard to organize something grassroots from across the country. But, you know, then again, like, the rage is real. Like, there's a lot of outcry about this. People are really upset. And so I think, you know, I think we're going to get a pretty decent turnout. You know, we'll see. Jen, you're going to be showing up. I know you're going to be taking your daughters. I know this is kind of personal for you and for them as well. Kind of, what are your thoughts?
So I think, you know, I just want to start with the fact that I think we're privileged to be able to even address this, right? Because we at Troutman Amin, we celebrate our diversity, right? We celebrate your achievements, who you are, what you bring to the table. This is, it doesn't matter across the board. We really, like Puja said, you know, it's great lawyering, right? And so I think that we're privileged to be able to be in this position. I think it's unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate that, you know, males excluding females, whatever the other name is. I like that name better, right? I think it's unfortunate that they've decided to keep that stance. And I am looking forward to going to their conference, because I think it's important that they understand that this behavior is not okay. It's not okay. And it's important that for me, my daughters, right? I have an 11 and 8-year-old, 2 girls, and I want them to know, your voice matters. You put your work, you put your effort and you work and you're consistent. You're going to get to the moon, and there are going to be people there that don't want you to make it. And you have to fight. You have to fight. You have to use your voice, because it's not okay for someone to just judge you because you're a female. And I think for Puja specifically, she has such an amazing following, and she's just such a force to be reckoned with. The fact that MEF thought that sending an email at midnight was going to just kind of go by the wayside, to me they clearly have not even taken a step to look at who they're dealing with. This is not okay. And I'm really looking forward to bringing, our voices heard, and to bringing this to the people's attention to know, you can't have an old boys club. Those days are over. And I think it's important that we say it. And I'm thankful, Eric and Puja, that you guys allow us to have a platform where we can say, no, this isn't okay.
Absolutely, Jen. Always here. We'll support you forever, and we appreciate you supporting us as well, of course. As we get to the interview here, we're about to pivot over. It'd be interesting to talk to the guys over at Locke about this too. Puja, obviously, I want you to have the last thoughts here.
Well, I sat down on a webinar just recently, and I know it really stuck with you, Tori, but I had to learn where my voice was. I had to learn how loud my voice was. I had to learn to use my voice, and you helped me. Right. So the man saying to my left helped me use my voice as a baby attorney. And I will continue to use my voice, hoping that it impacts, my associates, female or male, young or experienced. So, I will continue to trust my outrage, but I really just wanted to stop and pause, Eric, and say thank you. Right. I have never been more confident in my entire life. And it's fantastic, because now I'm running around on my own, and it's because, you having this podcast, you investing into just younger attorneys or more experienced attorneys, no matter race, no matter religion, no matter gender, you really dedicate yourself to the profession of law, and you really make good lawyers, and you assist people in making good lawyers. And to me, at the end of the day, when, as Jen correctly pointed out, as I always say, it matters about good lawyering, and it doesn't matter who you are. As long as you are capable of being a good lawyer, there's always a place at Trump and Amin. So
I love that. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you only get one life, right? This is it. And this is your profession. And if you are going to be a lawyer, man, you got to try to be a great one, right? You just got to be the greatest lawyer you can be. And then once you start to achieve that success, once you really start to feel, the strength and the respect, frankly, that comes with being a great attorney, you have to start using that voice in a way to really advance righteousness, right. What is right in the world. And again, we don't go out there looking like, we don't have pro bono action committees. We're not out there trying to fix the world. But when the fight comes to you, I mean, you gotta, like I said, you gotta be vicious, man. You cannot just lay down and act like, oh, it's okay, because it's a long way from okay. But okay, for now, I think we've talked and exhausted ourselves, although just for now. There'll be more, trust me. And I think I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of how the protests play out, what the press looks like around it. I mean, I think there's gonna have to be change, but we'll talk about that later. But for now, why don't we get to Section 230 and these brilliant guys at Locke. I'm really excited to talk to them. Now, through the power of the Troutman Amin LLP firm, we bring you an exclusive interview with Tim and Mike, the brilliant minds behind a brand new argument under Section 230 that might change the telecommunication landscape forever. And now, through the power of Troutman Amin LLP, we are incredibly excited to bring you an interview with two of the conquering heroes of TCPA world, Tom Cunningham and Mike McMorrow of a very good firm, Locke. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks. We're happy to be here.
Thanks, Eric. Good to have you. Or good to
So we brought you on to talk about this massive win that you've got on behalf of Stratix Network, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. But everyone that's been tuning in so far has been having us listen to us talk about this MEF thing. Really big mistake these guys made, kind of the way they mistreated Puja. And again, the event. We're recording this. The event's tomorrow. We know we suspect there's going to be some protests. So I think by the time this actually airs, it's going to be a situation where people are very aware of what's happened. And one of the things we were talking about, which we thought was very unfortunate, was there was one panel member, a guy named Kevin Rupee. I know you guys don't have the full background here, but despite the fact that Puja had been treated very roughly, and despite the fact that he's in our ecosystem, he's a big follower of TCPA world, and somebody frankly that we thought we knew, and he went forward with the panel. I just thought, man, that's just a really cowardly thing to do, very, very weak. And not something that you would expect from somebody who's really pretty well set in his career. Now, I'm not expecting you guys to opine on him or this specific situation, but in the spirit of kind of International Women's Month, I figured I'd just ask you guys, like, what kinds of things does Locke Lord do? What kinds of things do you guys look to, in terms of assuring, women have a role in the legal profession and they're being promoted and taken care of properly?
Yeah, I don't really think it's been an issue for us here at Locke Lord, Eric. I mean, we were very proud to be one of the few AmLaw 100 firms that had a woman as the chair of our firm for many, many years, Jerry Clements. And, we've always been very proud of our record of promoting women associates to partnership. I don't know exactly what our statistics are these days, but my understanding is that we do pretty well when compared to other firms. I don't really understand where the issue even comes from, frankly. I'm a guy who likes to work with good lawyers, and it really doesn't matter to me, whether it's what the gender of that lawyer is or their religion or their race or any of that stuff. That's never mattered to me. We hire good lawyers and we promote good lawyers.
Love it. Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm, Tom's down in Shangri-La down there in Florida. And I don't, I've only been at the firm for about a year now. And, my insight's really limited to the Chicago office, but, the person that runs the Chicago office here is a woman. I would say, a very large number of the partners here are women. A good number of the associates are women. There's ample opportunity at this firm for women to advance and to really, to really work on to really do the kind of legal work, especially in what I do, litigation, that, it was really seen much more as a boys' club when I got out of law school back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Just my experience has been I've worked with more women associates than male associates. This firm has been, at least in my view, extremely supportive of women since the day I got here.
Yeah, and I will say that about Locke Lord. I mean, look, I'm pretty rough on big law from time to time because I think there's a lot that's really not positive about the model. But I think Locke Lord really does kind of buck the trend in a couple of ways. One is, it's no coincidence that I had you guys on as part of this discussion, because I do think Locke Lord has been something of a leader, perhaps not, the absolute gold standard, but certainly something of a leader when it comes to promoting women amongst its ranks. And I also view it as, unlike many firms, I think that Locke Lord is a real litigation kind of has a lot of firepower. Whereas a lot of big law firms, I say this all the time, like if you want to become a great lawyer, don't go to big law because they're not going to teach you how to be great lawyers. That's not to say that they don't bring in great lawyers, and sometimes they do. But I think Locke Lord might actually be an exception where you guys really are known as kind of very gritty litigators, and I respect that. Which is kind of why we brought you on, because of course you guys have just a massive win to talk about. But before we get into that, Tom, Mike, why don't you give us a little bit about your background, kind of who you are, and kind of what brought you into the TCPA world on behalf of Stratix?
Well, I began my career in the Chicago office. That's how Mike and I knew each other. In fact, short aside, Mike and I worked together at the beginning of our careers at a different law firm. I was a senior associate at the time, and Mike was a summer associate. And our careers went in different directions for many, many years, and then came back together again last year. But I spent most of my career in the Chicago office representing companies in consumer class actions, for lack of a better term, all types of different consumer protection cases, including over the past decade or so, a lot of TCPA litigation, all of which ultimately led me to Stratix as a client. And although Stratix, as we'll talk about, isn't in the business of making calls or telemarketing or those sorts of things, as a technology provider to companies that are engaged in telemarketing activities, Stratix would occasionally find itself either sued as a defendant in a case or the recipient, more frequently, the recipient of a subpoena in somebody else's TCPA litigation.
And Mike, what's your background?
So Tom started you out with it. I started as a summer associate at the firm that Tom was at the time, and then we merged with a much larger firm where I was for the next 8 years. I was my background at that time was really just in general commercial litigation and actually a lot of utility rate making and regulatory litigation. And then in 2008, when the market went down, it was a bad time to be a senior associate at a big law firm. And so I found myself looking for other things to do. I wound up doing class action litigation right at the time. Right at the time that the TCPA litigation was really taking off. And so I joined a plaintiff's firm and started doing a lot of cramming litigation and a lot of TCPA litigation. And TCPA is a privacy statute, even though it's sometimes not seen as that. It's kind of hard to litigate those kinds of issues that arise under the TCPA for a decade and not start to understand privacy law and get into privacy law a little bit. So I had my own firm for about 11 or 12 years there, and I just joined up with Locke last year, really just about a year ago, and they let me let me play with live ammunition here, so I enjoy working there.
Well, I said wow because I mean it's a rare track for someone to go on the plaintiff side and then find themselves back in on the defense side at like a big law firm. So good for you, man. It sounds to me like, Tom, you really kind of spoke up for this guy and was like, this Mike guy, he's brilliant. And he might be, because as we kind of start talking now about kind of why you guys are here, I got to give you a bunch of accolades. We're going to unpackage this, but for our viewers, so two things that I really appreciate about what these guys have done. First, in representing Stratix in a case that's being brought by the FTC, that's the Federal Trade Commission, under the TSR and other enactments, very, very, very few companies will fight these things, right? So often these defendants, when facing potentially crippling damages and with the feds, the FTC, or maybe some AGs after them, they just roll over, they just play dead. They agree to enter into a consent order. They're kind of faced with what amounts to the equivalent of a plea bargain. Now, this is civil, not criminal, but it's essentially the same thing, right? You agree to walk away from certain behaviors, you agree to pay a bunch of money, you agree that you are a bad actor, and in exchange, they let you live to see another day. Otherwise, so the threat goes, they're going to sue you and put you out of business. And rather than roll over, I really appreciate that Stratix, with you guys as counsel, decided to fight back against the commission, but not just fight back, ultimately win, and win on a brand new theory, incredibly esoteric, incredibly, frankly, this is not something that, even the czar would have thought to bring. I mean, this is something very, very creative, and it's wonderful. So, I mean, let's before we talk about the exact argument, can you guys kind of give me the background of, and again, I know some of this is privilege, I know some of this you're just not going to be able to talk about because it's still kind of a live case, but if you can give me anything about the thinking about, Stratix and its position being brought into the case and why it was in the case and kind of its mindset in deciding, hey, look, we're not just going to roll over here, we're going to fight this.
Sure. Well, Stratix has been struggling with the FTC going all the way back to October of 2020, when one of its companies, a company that is commonly owned with Stratix Networks, received a CID, or civil investigative demand, from the FTC. And over the course of a couple of years, we were constantly struggling with the FTC. They had served the wrong company. They hadn't actually served Stratix Networks. Stratix Networks is based out of Canada. It's a Canadian corporation. The FTC thought maybe if they served this domestic company that was had the word Stratix in it, even though it isn't really related to Stratix Networks, that somehow they could get to Stratix Networks that way. And so we fought with them for that for a long time. It wound up in litigation here in Florida on a petition to enforce the CID. That case was ultimately dismissed in January of 2023. And that's when the FTC got the DOJ involved and decided that they would just go ahead and sue Stratix for allegedly substantially assisting telemarketers in violating the telemarketing sales rule. And I think they did that because they had not had any success dealing with us over the course of the prior 3 years. And there were some personalities involved that I think wanted to really make an example of Stratix. And they made it very difficult for us to try to resolve the case. We went to Washington, D.C. several times. We met with the FTC commissioners. We met with the head of the Division of Consumer Protection at the FTC. We met personally with the DOJ lawyers once they became involved. And at every turn, we tried to convince them that Stratix was and is a good corporate citizen, was willing to engage in practices that would improve compliance by the users of its platform. And all the FTC ever wanted was a massive civil penalty from Stratix. They really wanted to make an example of Stratix, and there really was no way that Stratix could give them what they wanted, because we felt very strongly that Stratix hadn't done anything wrong, and in fact was trying to do everything right and wanted to be cooperative. Stratix is always cooperative with any form of law enforcement, and it gets inquiries from law enforcement all the time and immediately responds and is cooperative. And so this was just something different for us, dealing with an agency like the FTC that really didn't seem to want that cooperation.
Well, they wanted to make an example out of them, and they made an example, but not the example that they were trying to make. But we'll get to that here in a second. So just to level set for our viewers, Stratix Network is what's called a ringless voicemail provider. Maybe it does some other things. Tom, how would you explain what services Stratix provides?
Sure. I mean, Stratix is an interactive computer service that it really is just a software platform that users can use to distribute audio files. And really the way the technology works is a user records their own audio file, they upload it to Stratix servers, and then use Stratix software to distribute it to recipients. Typically, the recipients of those audio messages are identified by a telephone number. And that gets into, one of the arguments that we made that the court didn't actually rule upon, which is when Stratix computer server sends an audio message to the computer server of a cell phone service provider, is that in fact a telephone call? The user, the recipient of the message, may use his or her cell phone to dial into his cell phone service provider and listen to the message on his or her phone, but they could also access their voicemails using a computer or an iPad or all kinds of different forms of technology that can be used to access and listen to a message. We never really got into that issue in this case because Section 230, which I know we're going to talk about, applies and provides Stratix with a complete immunity as an interactive computer service provider.
So I appreciate the way you framed your response there, and I know you kind of have to, and this is what I love about great lawyers who are willing to come on even during a live case and kind of talk it through, because they have the confidence to know that they can choose their words wisely, as you just did. Colloquially, right, and I'll use these words, not him, Stratix is a ringless voicemail provider, right? They are offering the service of allowing folks to create messages that they would like to have delivered directly into somebody's voicemail without the phone ringing. At least that's the concept. And as Tom correctly pointed out, look, you don't just have to get that on your cell phone. You can call in from a landline if you want. And there's also arguments that I think are pretty good that the delivery takes place not actually over a cell phone number at all, but via business class landlines to the third-party voicemail service providers. But those weren't the arguments that were brought here. And you heard Tom mention Section 230. And I just love this. And as much as I want to explain it, Tom, Mike, you guys are the masterminds behind it. Can you explain, what does Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act provide? What's its importance? And just at a broad level, not necessarily as applied to this case yet, just what is it so that folks understand what Section 230 is?
Sure. Well, Section 230 I'd never heard of before this case. So, and I'm not the mastermind of the entire argument. That honor goes to my client, the in-house lawyer at Stratix, a gentleman named Andrew Eiler, who first brought the idea of a Section 230 argument to me and said, "What do you think of this?" And I said, "Well, I never heard of it before, but let's take a look and see if it fits." Section 230 is a part of the Communications Decency Act, and it was enacted to encourage the development of technology that would facilitate communication using the internet without fear that you're going to be held liable or responsible simply by providing a technology. And the earliest cases were against the internet service providers like America Online and Prodigy, some of these old names that we don't really think about anymore. We're back in the early days of when people were really starting to communicate using the internet. These companies were being sued for defamatory statements that were being posted on bulletin boards or things that people were doing unlawfully using their platforms. And the concern that they had at the time was, if we take something down that's lawful, we might get sued by the person who posted it. Or if we agree that we're going to take something down, but we don't do it competently and we're negligent in how we take it down, we might get sued by somebody who's been harmed by it. So Section 230 was enacted to give protection to companies like Prodigy, AOL. Today, companies like, Twitter or X or Meta or Facebook, social media companies provide these platforms, and they are protected against lawsuits in which somebody says, "Hey, somebody misused your platform. They used it in an unlawful way, and so we're going to hold you liable for that."
Yeah, perfect. So Section 230 is generally referred to as the law that built the internet. It is what allows companies like X, right, to put up a post that is generated by a user that, of course, the platform's not vetting in real time as that post gets put up. And so if I post on my X account, which I don't even have, that I think Britney isn't very nice, which I would never say, but that can be viewed as defamatory because if the czar says something and it's plainly true. And so why is it that you can post things on X without X being sued? And the answer is Section 230, which provides that essentially an interactive computer service like Twitter, like X, like Facebook is not liable for the content of the messages that its users publish on the platform. And these are critical words, not just for the internet, of course, because this is what allows us to have freedom of speech on the internet, but also critical now as we start turning to the specifics of the Stratix case, and we look at the application of Section 230, again, largely viewed as a safety permission slip for online companies, and its application to developing telephony platforms like Stratix. So Tom, can you unpackage, or Mike, you're here too, you can weigh in. I'm not sure kind of exactly which. Actually, let me just ask, Mike, what was your role versus Tom's role in kind of approaching the arguments in front of the FTC or against the FTC?
Well, I helped Tom put the arguments together, tee them up. I've done a little bit of Section 230 work in the past. Not a ton, but it's come up in a few of my cases over the years. And I've always thought, it's a much broader statute than it's being used as. It says, internet or other interactive computer services. So, what are other interactive computer services? And, that's a potentially very broad definition. So I helped Tom put the arguments together, and along with two other members of our team here, Kit Mendergall and Megan Tom. Megan helped me out quite a bit on this, on putting these arguments together. And I did a lot of writing. and that I guess that's my role,
Well, I see your plaintiff's hat, right? As soon as you start saying, well, I read the statute, it seemed much broader than was being applied. I was like, okay, there's that plaintiff's lawyer, mentality. But okay, so bringing it back to you, Tom, kind of break it down for us, in terms of how you approach the argument, because I'll tell you, when I first heard this argument, I thought to myself, there's no way that Stratix is an internet service provider or, an interactive computer system of the sort that I think of Section 230 as traditionally protecting, and yet when you break it down element by element, as the court did here, and really kind of look at it, it's actually pretty clear that Stratix does meet the definition. So walk us through it.
Right. Well, very simply, an interactive computer service is a computer server that is accessible by multiple users. It's really just that simple. The fact that Stratix makes its server available to its users, and it has hundreds, and let me digress for a moment and say a large portion of Stratix business is not telemarketing related at all. Many governments use its system to distribute pre-recorded messages out to communities. Schools use it to communicate with parents about a snow day or something along those lines. There's healthcare messages that get broadcast. So there's a lot of political messages. A lot of Stratix customers are politicians or political groups who want to send you a pre-recorded message about some political message. So it's not just a platform that is used by telemarketers. But the point here is it's used by many people. Many people can access that server. That makes it an interactive computer service.
And so because it's an interactive computer service, what result? How does it follow from, okay, fine, Stratix is an interactive computer service, but is it still not distributing telemarketing content, and where does Section 230 come in as a protection?
Well, the second step that the court looks at then is the person who is bringing the claim, in this case the FTC, seeking to hold Stratix responsible as though Stratix was the speaker of the message, the publisher, if you will, in the language of Section 230. And here we argued clearly the FTC was, Stratix doesn't engage in any telemarketing. It simply makes the technology available, but Stratix was being sued for substantially assisting third parties in violating the telemarketing sales rule. That is, if those messages didn't violate the telemarketing sales rule, Stratix wouldn't be responsible. But in the government's view, if those messages did violate the telemarketing sales rule, then Stratix was liable to the same extent as those telemarketers, just as though it were the speaker of that message.
Okay, but to be clear, the allegation that the FTC brought was that the content limitations of the TSR were being violated, not some sort of a procedural limitation of the TSR. I don't remember off the top of my head specifically what it was, but it was something like what was being said or what wasn't being said in the message is what was triggering the underlying TSR claim, right?
Well, there's an exception to 230 for content neutral claims. So if Stratix somehow could have prohibited somebody from using its service in an unlawful way without delving into the content of what was being communicated, that would not have been protected by Section 230. And the government really dug in on this argument. Their position was, hey, all Stratix has to do is make sure that they've got consent to convey these messages. Does the user have proper consent or not? Doesn't matter what the message is. The only question is, do they have consent? But our argument was, first you got to determine whether the message is telemarketing or not. Because if it isn't telemarketing, they don't need consent. You don't need consent to send a political message. You don't need consent to send a healthcare message or a school closure message or things along those lines. So, our argument was the first thing the government is telling us we must do is review the content of these communications and decide, do they or do they not constitute telemarketing?
Yeah, and that was one of the big things that I saw in the ruling. There was that big pivotal moment in the oral argument, which I was not at, but that the court encapsulates in kind of in its rendition of the opinion, in which it essentially says, I asked the FTC, is it possible for for Stratix to have complied with the law without reviewing the content of the message. And again, I weren't there, you were there. It must have been this big aha moment where the FTC's lawyer would essentially have to either concede or just run away from the question, because there really is no way for Stratix to have been able to meet the requirements without, as you just pointed out, knowing what the content was. Content had to be reviewed. This was a content-specific claim, even if they tried to, cast it as a procedural claim.
That's right. And, the government, they made a big deal about how this was going to open the floodgates and this was going to be this sea change in the law, that a company like Stratix was protected by this immunity, et cetera, et cetera. But our argument, look, this is a very straightforward application of Section 230. This goes all the way back to the Zran versus America Online case, where the court said it's really impractical for America Online to review everything everyone's going to post on its website, make an instant snap judgment about whether it's lawful or unlawful, and then make the editorial decision about whether to allow it or not allow it. That is classic Section 230, and that's exactly what the government was suggesting Stratix needs to do here. Stratix needs to review every ringless voicemail that gets uploaded, decide, is it telemarketing or is it not telemarketing? Does it correctly identify the seller or not? Is it a fraudulent message? Has the user obtained all the necessary consents, whatever those may be, for the particular type of message that's being conveyed, and then make an instantaneous decision about whether to permit it to be published or not. I mean, as a practical matter, that's impossible. It just can't be done. And so if you were going to impose that obligation on whether it's America Online or today's Stratix, you're basically telling those companies that they can't operate that business, they can't make that platform available. A platform that's used lawfully tens, if not hundreds of thousands of times, every day or every week. So the idea of Section 230 is we want to encourage these tools for communication, notwithstanding the fact that some people may use them unlawfully. When those people do that, they will be held accountable, but the provider of the tool isn't to be held accountable.
I love it, Tom. And look, I got to say, I actually agree with you and the FTC here, because I do think this is a fairly straightforward, now that I've had you explain it to me, I do agree that this is a fairly straightforward application of Section 230. But on the other hand, I actually agree with the FTC that this is a sea change. And the reason is that the law of telecommunications has gone one direction, whereas the law of an open internet has gone a different direction, right? The law of common carriers going back to 2015, I think was more or less unaligned with the open internet concepts, where you've got essentially the carriers being akin to the service providers or interactive computer service providers, were both equally safe. Like neither one of them really faced much liability. But in the last 8 years, from 2015 onward, the telecommunications has become increasingly regulated, increasingly high risk for those that are in the space, not just for carriers, but for platforms like Stratix. And now, increasingly, that which you just described as impossible is exactly what is being required of these platform providers. Not only do they have robust know your customer requirements, auditing requirements, they've got the whole ITG ticketing process now for carriers and for voice service providers, where people are being required to look into traffic based upon the content, which is something we talked about in our last podcast, which is highly problematic to me, and make adjustments sometimes in real time. And a failure to do so, as we saw with Stratix, in many instances the DOJ and the FTC are arguing, hey look, the platform is now responsible as if it was substantially assisting or providing the content itself. So when we see this win, right, there's a reason that you guys are the first defense law firm, the first big law firm I've had on my podcast, because I view this as a massively noteworthy win. Not only was it creative as heck, not only was it really very, very thoughtful, but the permutations here, now as I zoom away from Stratix, I don't need you to agree with this part, although you can if you want to, but you don't have to. As I zoom away from Stratix and I look at the application of this rule to really any, not just ringless voicemail service provider, any text message provider, most AI platforms, most dialer platforms, and even some true voice service providers like your Tellys and your Twilios of the world, probably not your ultimate wireless carriers, but maybe, you start to see an avenue where, step by step, piece by piece, this law that built the internet might become the law that saves open telecommunications in this country. And man, it all started with you, Tom, and you, Mike. I mean, that is really something. I mean, you guys really might have, and I get it, it's just the first domino to fall. And as I do, as the czar, I look out to the distant horizon and I see all the different possibilities and how far this could run. And I see nothing but opportunity now for folks that are platforms to really take this and push it to the next level. And as the first mover here, I'm just curious, man. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Are you more just focused on Stratix and its application? Are you starting to think about the broader application of what you guys have done? Kind of, what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I want to emphasize that the party in Stratix position, the provider of the technology, is immune. The wrongdoer, or the alleged wrongdoer, is not immune. And so I want to emphasize that, the government makes it sound like, oh my God, the floodgates are going to be open to unlawful telemarketing. Well, that's not really true. If you telemarket unlawfully, you're still going to be the subject of, lawsuits by the FTC and plaintiffs' lawyers. So, it is protection for the provider of the technology that is used. And, Mike and I, in getting ready for the argument of the motion to dismiss, we went through all sorts of absurd hypotheticals. And I keep thinking of different hypotheticals where somebody provides something that someone else uses to engage in unlawful activity. You don't hold the manufacturer of the car responsible for the bank robbery because the bank robber uses it to get away, right? And this is not unlike that. We're providing a tool that is mostly used lawfully, can be abused and used unlawfully, but it's not Stratix's role to be a policeman to ensure that its product is always used lawfully. That is on the people who are using it, and they should be held accountable if they misuse it.
Yeah, so when we talk about telecommunications, I usually use the example of the bus because, again, common carrier doctrine used to be, right, telecommunications providers were common carriers, just like a bus in your local city is a common carrier, right? The bus doesn't ask you when you get on, who are you and where are you going and show me your papers, right? You just get on the bus. And if you happen to be, running away from a bank robbery you just committed and you got onto the bus to use it as your getaway car, the bus isn't liable, man. The bus is just going from place to place. The bus is doing what the bus does. And that used to be the rule for the carriers, right? The carriers weren't responsible if you called in a mob hit using the Verizon network, right? Like, the carriers aren't responsible for that. Or at least they never used to be. And today, increasingly, right, the law has changed. The carriers are no longer common carriers. They're just buses driving around the city. They are increasingly required to know who you are, check your papers, check your ID, make sure you've got all your papers in order before they let you onto the bus. And I've got a real problem with that from like a censorship standpoint. That's a totally different issue, I know. But what I love, again, is that this argument finally gives the bus drivers out there, the telecommunications providers, the folks that are not responsible for content but are merely providing a tool, instrumentality, and many times just like a pipe through which content might flow, finally gives them a strong legal defense for a position that has just been chipped away at nonstop for the last 8 years. And frankly, I'm just really glad to see it, guys. I mean, I think you guys have done a great thing. I don't want to overstate matters, but I think you've done a great thing for industry as a whole and really for free speech in this country. Whether you sought out to do that or not, you've really given me and really everybody else out there a new tool that we didn't have, and I just had to thank you. So I thought that was fantastic.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, guys. Well, look, we got about a minute left here. So anything that you folks would like to share? The name of the podcast is Deserve to Win. If you've got some thoughts in terms of how other litigators, how other platforms, how other folks in industry, or just really anybody, maybe women, can deserve to win out there, feel free. What are your thoughts, guys?
Mike, I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay. Well, I think I think I'm probably not the best person to talk about, how I think women should win. I think it's best to let women figure that out, and give them the room to run to figure that out. And I think they will. So I applaud what you guys are doing. To publicize what's going on at this conference. And in general. I've got a 12-year-old daughter. I want her to have a lot fewer restrictions on what she can do than women my age had, when I was coming up. And so, if you women who are sitting there, are able to help clear that path a little more, I applaud you for it. As for what you were talking about with Eric, with telecommunications being a utility, being regulated like a utility, I think about it. It goes back to my days of dealing with regulated utilities. What the FTC tried to do here would be the same as if they tried to sue the electricity carrier for providing the electricity and calling that substantial assistance. There are heavily regulated heavily regulated industries like telecommunications, like electric and gas, and they're heavily regulated for a reason. And there are entities that are there to regulate those kinds of companies. And the FTC is not that kind of an entity. They are there to regulate telemarketing and telemarketers, and that's not what Stratix does. That's not what telecommunications companies do.
Great point. Tom, any closing thoughts?
No, I appreciate you having us on. I agree with you. I think it's an important decision. I think it is going to get a lot lot I know it's already gotten a lot of notice from the government. So I think we're probably headed to the Ninth Circuit. And but I feel really good about it. I think it's the right decision. Sometimes you win ones that you're not supposed to win. Sometimes you lose ones that you should have won. But sometimes, like this one, we win a case that we really did deserve to win. And I think we did deserve to win this one.
Nicely done, Tom. Very good. You guys are winners. I hope that you smash them at the Ninth Circuit. Keep fighting the good fight. You're welcome back here anytime. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much, guys.
Wow. I mean, look, obviously these are the first guys that we've brought on from another big law firm, I guess you could consider them to be competitors, although, I'm not sure that I do, but I have to say, I'm really impressed. You know what I mean? We throw a lot of scorn on occasion on other law firms when they screw something up. So when somebody hits a jackpot like these guys did, this is a really big ruling, ramifications, as I was saying, kind of, as far as the eye can see. So I just thought it was fair to get them on, pat them on the back, say great job. They deserve a victory lap. They really do. This was really something new, something novel, and again, something I believe is gonna echo through eternity here in telecom law. So very impressed. But as we kind of wrap up, we spent most of the show, really all of the show, other than the interview, talking about MEF and talking about kind of the ongoing pernicious sexism that still is in our society, which is very unfortunate, and even the fact that people will bow down to it. People are not terribly brave, is a mild way of putting it, and even other women, right, will be quiet or hide or be afraid to raise their voice in support of women, even when there's plain injustice and mistreatment going on, just like as obvious as it can be, and still people are afraid to speak up. So there's lots to unpackage here as we wrap the show. Britt, I'll start with you. You can take and talk about whatever you want. What do you got?
Well, I really enjoyed their interview. You could tell that they're intelligent guys, and it was interesting to hear kind of their background and explanation as to the arguments that they presented to the court. But that aside, when they touched upon them not having issues at the firm in terms of promoting women and stuff, that was really nice to hear, because as you said, it doesn't happen in most big law firms, and it's really nice to hear about that.
Yeah, Locke has been a leader. They really have been for years. We vet our guests, pretty thoroughly, and of course, in the middle of this firestorm, we're not going to bring on somebody that wouldn't represent well. And it is ironic, of course, that we ended up having two white males along with Lilt, right, as our guests on this particular show. And I picked up, and you may have heard it, that there was two young female associates that assisted these guys, and they didn't come on the show. So I didn't love that. I let that go because I'm happy and pleased that they came on. Again, I want to recognize their accomplishment, but I think the two ladies who were mentioned, you have to forgive me, I did not catch their names. You also deserve a round of applause, so go ahead and give that to yourself, even though you weren't available to come on the show today. You really, whether you knew it or not, I think you were working to change the TCPA world, and I am appreciative. Well, thank you very much for that. Why don't we throw it over, John, kind of, what did you think, man? Kind of an interesting show, a little bit of a different format, certainly, but what are your thoughts?
I think the thing that stood out to me, especially about the interview, was, one, I'm like a closet Section 230 nerd, so that was very exciting to have that conversation. And then also, as former in-house counsel, I love the shout out from him about like, this wasn't our idea, this was our in-house guy's idea. So I thought that was really neat as well. And then as a white male, I'm not in a great position to talk about MEF. So, but I'm really enjoying conversation around it. And I'm also, it's not lost on me that I work at a law firm that has twice as many female lawyers as male lawyers. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So.
Well, look, man, I disagree. As a white male, your perspective is actually maybe the most important here, right? Like, and we've talked earlier in the show about all the different components of what leads to, the status quo continuing to exist. And it takes everybody, man. And, I would challenge you to recognize that, you're not less empowered to help the folks here. You're more empowered to help the folks here. So yeah, man, raise that voice of yours, buddy. I love, man, you're always good stuff. And you did a great job earlier in the day. So, I mean, you are a massive asset, man. I just love having you here, John. I'm going to tell you that every time I see you. I just love having you. Jen, I got two floating heads today. Jen, I know you're actually slated to attend the protest tomorrow. We talked about that earlier. I don't know. How do you want to wrap the show? What do you got?
So for me, I think this interview was really special. I love the fact that, I know they've made such a huge headway, but I really like the fact that one of the gentlemen said, I have a 12-year-old daughter, and just as a mom, it made me, get teary-eyed because, that's who I think of, right? Under these circumstances, I think of, whether my children will not be valued just because of the fact that they are female. And that's just not acceptable. Not today, not yesterday, not tomorrow. So for me, I think it's really important that we stand up and that when, injustices happen, we're not afraid to use our voice, because if we don't use our voice, then we're just basically saying it's okay. So to me, silence is an answer. And we're not going to be silent. We are not.
Indeed not. Tori, what'd you think?
I thought their argument was absolutely great, and I love that it puts responsibility where it actually lies instead of putting it on carriers and internet providers that, would have to have this absolutely extreme burden to follow the laws. Instead, it's more in the line of actual progress and these sorts of fields such as internet and telecom. And aside from that, I like that this law firm was also heavy in at least women leadership. And I do like that despite the two female associates that worked on the project, they still were given credit and mention. I believe one of their names was Megan. And he did say a lot of that the credit went to her.
That's a good point. You know what? They did do that. And that's a huge part of it, like when you're successful. And by the way, that's not just man-women dynamic. That's just good leadership on a team. You guys know when we do well around here, I always say it's completely because of me and you had nothing to do with it. No, just kidding. Obviously, right, it's always a team effort. And any, if you want to call it a leader, any good leader knows that if something goes wrong, that's on them, right? It was their responsibility to make sure it went well. And if something goes well, that's not on them. It's on the team that delivered, true, subject to their leadership and guidance. But at the end of the day, the team delivered. The team got it done. So I really appreciated that from both, showing good leadership, in addition to, I think, being a really important piece to advancing and recognizing the role of the lady professionals that were involved. So really good stuff from you, Tori, as always. Very, very good, and great stuff earlier as well. Queenie, how should we wrap this up on the special MEF/230 episode?
Look, whether you're a man or a female, I just love good lawyering.
Yeah.
And, when you make new novel arguments, which Trotman Amin is absolutely known for, right? Brittany had one of the biggest cases of our firm, and it was a novel argument that she created and handcrafted it, regardless if she's a male or a female. I love it. So kudos to them. I do agree with you, Tori, that they did give a good amount of credit to the female associates, regardless if they're female or male, was irrelevant. So yeah, good job, kudos, and I just loved all our talks earlier today, so I'm not going to be extremely repetitive, but you know where I stand.
Okay, and that's fair. That's very well done. I mean, look, I gotta say, man, Tom, Mike, you guys did a great job. As we've said repeatedly, I think this Section 230 thing, it's beautiful. It is not something that had occurred to me, and now that it's out, it's just one of those things. It's like, once you hear it, it's like, oh, you know what? It's obvious.
Yep.
But somebody else had to first shine the light on it so you could see, and I really appreciate that. I really do. And I guess it all, to your point, John, it goes back to the in-house guy. So whatever that person's name was, that was mentioned, but I forgot. You Canadian, you. Good job. Really appreciate you. And look, the MEF stuff, like, we've kicked it around, we've beaten it to death. We're going to keep beating it to death, though, because it's not something that we ought to be quiet on. As I said earlier, folks are angry, right? I mean, this is something that you just can't behave this way and think you're going to get away with it, because you're not. You're just not around here. And so long as Troutman and Mean and Deserve to Win is around, we're not going to go off looking for stuff. We don't go off, looking to try to, change the world. We wait, as we talked about earlier, we wait for things to come to us. But when they do come to us, man, we're not going to let go. So I'm not sure where this is going to end up. Definitely too late to apologize. Definitely too late for that. So we'll see where we land. Is this just a situation where we need regime change? Is this a situation where the organization has become so corrupted that it just can't survive any longer? I don't know. Haven't decided kind of where this is ultimately going to land. But we're definitely not done. This is just kind of, I don't want to say it's just the beginning, but we're definitely kind of moving in the direction of making change. And obviously that's what this is all about. So at the end of the day, thank you guys all for being here, for being supporters. Those of you that have raised your voice, and so many of you had. Lilith, of course, you're profoundly gifted, you're profoundly powerful, and you're always so brave. And we really appreciate you being a part of this, having your voice heard. Those of you that are listening to this, I hope that you're out there crashing the boards, man. Get on social media, let people know how you feel, and spread the word. Until next time, guys, thank you so much. This has been the 24th edition of the Deserve to Win podcast. As always, we love you. See you next time.